Yeah, so another time, another build. Today we are going to work on a real-time chat application. So this is going to be a fully serverless real-time chat room that we are going to build. We are going to use services like API Gateway, Lambdas, and DynamoDB table. If you're a beginner to cloud computing, this is going to be a fun video to work on. Don't worry, all the codes are going to be heavily generated using AI. As I say, the best way to learn tech now is bringing in AI. So the focus, or one of the things that we are going to be doing as part of the oncoming videos, is that we will try as much as possible to bring in AI, right? So there's going to be a platform that I'm going to drop a link in the description below. Just check it out. In there, you are going to see AI prompts that will help you generate all the code, the Lambda functions, and then the resources that we use. For those of you that would also prefer the traditional GitHub way, I'll do all to drop the link to the code and everything in GitHub, and then you can check it out from there, right? So what we are going to be doing today, or what we are going to be building today, is pretty much going to involve these three key services. We are going to use API Gateway to manage our persistent WebSocket connections, right? And then we are going to perform all our execution logic with Lambda. As I said, this is going to be a fully serverless build. And then we will store our connections ID and things like that in the DynamoDB, right? Which we are going to enable a TTL to expire certain connections when people sign up or come into it. So why this parting matters, right? So traditionally, when people want to create a WebSocket connection, what they used to do is pretty much have their server somewhere. They will configure it with probably a Python code or a Node.js, whatever they want to use to establish their connections. And then they will have to kind of manually scale it. They have to pay 24/7 and all. But with this serverless approach, what is going to happen is Lambda runs only when there is a message, only when there is a chat coming in. And then you are going to pretty much pay per message, right? Not per connections. And then also this is going to be AWS managed, so scaling is not going to be a problem. And then there is going to be a zero infrastructure to manage, right? Why this pattern shows up, and where this pattern shows up and why it is important, right? So most of the real-time notification platforms that we work with, or platforms that we go that gives us live notifications and all that, make use of this pattern we are going to learn today. The live dashboards that you see, your messaging app, your collaborative tools, where people are able to edit documents together, people are able to share dashboards, do a lot of things. All these things make use of the patterns we are going to discuss in this video. So this is going to be a fun build. As I said on Tech with Kwabna, the best way of learning cloud computing, we need tech, is to going into the console and then building stuff. So that's what we pretty much do here. If you are new here, kindly do all to give us a like, subscribe, drop in the comment section if you have any questions, and we'll always be readily available to assist and help. Let's jump right into it. This is going to be a fun build. Let's jump in. The first thing we are going to do is to create our DynamoDB table, right? So we will pretty much look for DynamoDB. Now, the purpose for this DynamoDB table is this. This is pretty much going to be our connection registry, right? Every active WebSocket client that we are going to create, for the chat to happen, would have to be kind of registered or have to have a row in the DB table. So I'm just going to give my DB table a name and then call it chat connections. The partition key is going to be connection ID, which is going to be unique, right? And then the type for this is going to be a string. Come to customize settings, and then from there I will have it standard and then ensure that I have on demand, so that based on the number of tests, that's how we are going to be charged, right? Leave everything as default, then I will create my table. Now that the table is ready, I'm going to enable TTL. When we say TTL, pretty much it stands for time to live, right? So TTL is a DynamoDB feature that automatically deletes items after a specific timestamp. Because this is a chat feature that we are building, right? We don't want a situation where people will start a lot of conversations and then we will have their connections ID in the DB table. So for example, if someone starts the chat and then there is a disconnection, there is something that goes wrong and then the chat goes off, right? what we seek to do is to delete that entry from our DB table after some time. So we can do that by enabling TTL. To do that, if I come to this side, you see that currently my time to leave or the TTL is off. So I'll basically come to actions, turn on TTL, and then here I can choose to enter the time if I want it in minutes, an hour, something. For this, I'm just going to do 60 minutes. Since this is a demo, then I'll call it TTL. This is going to be the attribute for this on my DB table. Then I'll turn it on. So now we are done with our DynamoDB table for our real-time chat app. The next thing I'm going to do is to create an IAM role that our resources is going to use, primarily a Lambda. So I'll search for IAM, then I'll open. Pretty much come to roles. I'm going to create a role. This is going to be a service role for our Lambda. So I'm going to select Lambda, then I'll click on next. Now I'm going to look for the Lambda basic execution rule, right? This is an AWS manager. I'm going to select it, and then I'll give my role a name. Okay, then I'll proceed to create my Lambda role. So I'll search for my role, the chat Lambda role, and then now I'm going to create an inline permissions, right? So what I just added was some basic Lambda rule that kind of allows you to create CloudWatch log groups and all that. But I'm going to add the actual permissions, and I'm going to do that by creating an inline rule, right? For those of you following the guide, you have the inline permissions that I'm going to have. And then if you're following the guide, you realize that I also give you guys access to the AI prompts that you can use to. One of the key components of this new form of tutorial is that now there is AI to help us do some of the things that you have to manually research to do. So yeah, you can just copy the prompt and then follow along. But I already have my policy statements readily available, so I'm going to quickly update it, and then so this is it. Now the permissions I'm giving my Lambda function is one DynamoDB access. I want my Lambdas to be able to put item into the DB, get item, delete, perform scan operations. And then the resource is specifically to my DB table. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to make it all resources. And then now, my WebSockets permissions also, right? I could have simply, in production, I would have simply restricted it to that specific ARN. But for this demo, I'm just going to change it to all resources. And then this should be fine. So these are the permissions that my Lambdas will need for now. So I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'll give my policy a name, then I'll proceed to create it. Again, for those of you following the guide, you realize that all these things I have the resource. That's why I admonish that as you build, take time to go through the guide. I explain every key concept that I mentioned in there. All right. So now the next thing I'm going to work on is to create our Lambda functions. We are going to create about 3 or 4 Lambda functions, so please follow along carefully. Now, I will simply search for Lambda, then I'll create my first Lambda. My first Lambda, I'm going to call it Chat Connect. The purpose of this Lambda is this. It's going to run every time a new WebSocket connection is established, right? So once someone comes and initiates a chat, this is the first Lambda that is going to come in there, right? It's going to save our connection ID into our database, and then it will set the TTL value, and then it will return a good response to our application, and then we'll be able to initiate our start conversations, right? So this is it. The runtime is pretty much going to be Python 3.14. And then the permission, right? I'm going to use the rule, the execution rule that we created. So I'll search for it. I think it's chat row, the first one. Then I'll click on create function. So for those of you following the guide, you realize that I show you guys how to use Claude, right? A prompt that you can copy and paste in Claude to generate your code. But those of you watching along, the code to also be ready available in GitHub. You can just copy and then paste the working code in there. But I really want you guys to practice how to use AI to generate your own code. Have it work so that you learn. This is the best way of learning cloud now. AI is here to help us. So I already have my code in here that I'm going to replace. This code is very simple again. It's just calling the DynamoDB stuff I mentioned, and then it's kind of writing our connection ID and then the time TTL stuff, and then where the time you get connected into a DB table. And then if it's successful, it returns to us a status code of 200. That is pretty much all that is doing. So my region is US East 1. So I'm going to deploy my Lambda function, a very simple Lambda function for this. Then I'll come to configuration. I'm going to increase my timeout to about, say, 30 seconds for this. That should be fine for such a use case. Now I'm going to proceed to create my second Lambda function. So I'll come to create. I'm going to call this one chat send message, and then the right time is going to be this. Again, the purpose of this second Lambda function is pretty much very important. This is the core of the app, right? It receives a message from one client, scans the DB table, there is an active connection, then it pushes the message to the other one via the management API that we are going to create, right? So this is more like the orchestrator that is going to move the message from one person to the other. So this is a very important Lambda. In fact, pretty much the most important Lambda of the entire component. Now I'm going to select the same execution rule. That is why it's better to create your rule, right? If I had to use create default, I'll have to go and add the permissions manual to each of them. But because I created it this way, I can simply do it and then I'll make progress. So the Lambda code for that too is readily available. I have a AI prompt that kind of generates that. Again, that will also be readily available. You can check the guide to copy the prompt. Guys, I want you to do that often, right? Because once you generate prompts with your code using AI tools, right, there are going to be errors. So you should be able to play with it to a point where you understand the code it generates, and then you have a proper workflow, right? AI results for myself is going to be different from yours. So if you're able to get your own workflow, that will be a very great addition to you. So now the Lambda, I'm going to easily update it. So as I said, this Lambda is just basically going to be the orchestrator, serving the connections between our different stuff that we have. So I'm just going to update my region, and then also please ensure you have, if you are using the same DB table name, that's fine, but if you are having different DB table name, ensure you reference the right resource or the appropriate resources. And then in there, any place where there is the need for you to update your region, just do that. In fact, some of these things, these are not really important because I'm running it in AWS itself. That's why I don't even need to set the region name specifically, right? But mostly I move my code from run it from different angles. So mostly I prefer it this way so that I can see what exactly is going on. Okay. Now that is deployed, let me set this to about a minute. Save. Then I'm going to create another Lambda function. That is going to be our disconnect Lambda function, right? So this is going to be our third Lambda function. So I'll come in. This is very simple. The same approach. So just follow along the same Python runtime, the same permission. Guys, please, if you are here with us, kindly drop a comment. Let me know where you are watching from. If you like it, just let me know. And then dropping a comment and liking the video really help promote the channel to a lot of people that needs this cloud education that we are doing in here. We really appreciate it. Do all to like, subscribe. Okay, so what the disconnect Lambda is pretty much doing is when a person disconnects cleanly, right, it will remove the connection ID from a DB table, so that when there's not going to be a situation where there is an active chat happening but no one is at the end and all. So just a cleanup Lambda. Yeah, so this is very simple. It just removes stuff from our DB table. So this is just the Lambda function, right? Let me just update my region. And then there we have it. So this is a very simple code base, as you guys can see. Let me just increase my runtime to a minute. 30 seconds should be fine. All right, so these are 3 key Lambda functions, right? We've created the connect, the chat connect, the chat send, and then the chat disconnect. Now we are going to create our WebSockets API. That's the next thing. So I'll start by first searching for API Gateway. Then I'm going to create an API. This is going to be a WebSocket API. So I'll click on build. Someone might again ask, why WebSocket? So WebSocket is pretty much a persistent two-way connection between a browser and then a server over a single TCP connection, right? So unlike HTTP, where the request response, that is when a browser asks and a server answer connection gets closes, a WebSocket stays open so that the server can push data to the browser at any time without the browser asking first and stuff. So pretty much just see it as the way your normal chat application works, right? Your live chat modes, multiplayer games, and how collaborative tools pretty much works. They mostly use WebSocket APIs. So I'm just going to create that and then we will proceed. So I'm just going to call it my chat API. And then one important thing is to set your action. So my action, I'm going to use request, same as they have there, right? The routes, right? I'm going to have request.body.action. So what this pretty much means is this expression kind of tells the API that, you see, this is the routing decisions you are going to make. If someone sends in an action and then the action is say send message, I want you to invoke this, I want you to do this, right? So this is kind of helping it make the decision where to go. If someone comes in, a person wants to start a chat, right? And then the action is say connect, this is what I want you to do. So that is going to be part of say action colon say connect chat or something. Then this is the decision, or this is what I want you to do. So that's why this is very important. So let me just click on next, and I'm going to proceed to add a couple of routes. So I'll add my connect routes. That is the $connect route is triggered when the client connects to your API, and then when the client disconnects, and these are default ones, so I can easily add them. Then I'll proceed to create my own custom route. So my custom route, I'm going to call it send message. That is going to be for my message, and I'll click on add. Oh, sorry, this should be fine. Then I'll click on next. Now on this page, so I'm going to do the actual connection. So what I'm saying is, when someone wants to connect to my chat, right, if the action that comes in is connect, then I want to do this integration. Now I'm going to integrate it with my Lambda function. The Lambda function I want to integrate it with is going to be my chat connect. So once you start the chat, call this Lambda right into my DB table and do whatever that Lambda does. Then if it disconnects, the same Lambda integration, I'm going to call the disconnect. For default, I just want to use my send message, and then when it's a send message itself, I also want to use the send message. Do you understand it now? So this is how easily we configure the route and pointing them to our lambdas. So I'll click on next. And then this is going to be my stage name, right? So for my stage, I'm going to call it prod. So my stage is going to be prod. And then I'll click on next. Then I'll click on create deploy. So by doing this, now my API gateway will go into my Lambda function and automatically associate all the necessary or the needed permissions that is required, right, to do everything there is to do. So that's one key thing you have to be aware of, or you have to note. So if I, for example, if I come to my Lambda and I come to permissions, right, you can see API gateway now has kind of connected to it. So I'm able to invoke this Lambda via the API gateway. So this is pretty much all the necessary backend configurations that we are required to do this. Now, we are going to then deploy our simple UI or our simple web application that will do this. Again, the UI that I'm going to develop is not going to be the focus of this class, right? So that is also heavily generated using AI. Generate your own UI, host it, share the link in the comment section. Let's look at it. Let people look at it. People drop comments. And then let me see who is going to get us the best UI. But I already have it in them. I'm going to use my test editor. Pretty much I'm going to use probably, say, Cursor for this. I use Cursor nowadays, so I might use that. Yeah. Okay. So this is my chat. So all that you can do is to just come into your whatever test ID you have and then create a chat.html, or if you want, just pretty much create an index.html file. Once you create it, just paste your code in there. Forget about the other two. That is not really relevant. Okay, so this is my chat. In fact, so that it's clear, let me just delete everything to give us a clean slate. Okay, so I'm just going to create a new file. Call it index.html. And then in here, I'm going to paste my code. So again, this code also will be readily available on the GitHub repo. But our advice again, guys, please use the platform. You will have all these detailed instructions and everything in there. So this is my dummy chat web application. I'm just going to quickly go live. If you are using this and then you, or VS Code, this is an extension, right? A live server extension. You can just install it. Once you install live server, you're able to kind of preview your web application code on your local. That's why you see. So yeah. So live server kind of has opened this chat application on my user interface. I'm going to duplicate this. Sorry. I think now Chrome has a feature where I can split the view. Beautiful. So that this looks like an actual chat, I'm just going to open it in two side-by-side windows. Two side-by-side windows. Now to my code again. Inside the code, you realize that there is a parameter that we have to update. That is our API, our WebSocket URL, right? We have to connect it to our application. So I'm just going to come to my API route, and then in here, come to stages. Then there is already the pro stage, so I can easily copy this and then update my code. Then I will save it. So now that I've done the integration, let me come into my application and then say this one is user Kobina and this one is user Sagari. So 2 users trying to connect. So let me send a message. If everything is fine, then this should work. So I'm sending a message. Let me restart this again. Okay. And then now let me restart this again. I think the session not good. So you can see now our serverless chats for both are connected, right? So if I come in here and I do hello, you see this user has received it. Oops, because it's the same user, that's why this is happening. Because I refresh the feed, let me change it to Sagari. And then let me change this to Kobina. And then let me type again. So you see Kobina sends again in here. And then, yes, it comes in here from Sagari. So you see we've been able to up working. Yeah, so guys, now your instruction is just go ahead, modify your interface, make it better, I know. But the key thing is now you've learned how to establish or create a WebSocket connections and everything as part of our application and then integration. So this is a very simple tutorial. But the key component is not just this application you see, but the things you learn, creating a Lambda function, establishing the WebSockets, doing all those routes, the DynamoDB database and all. These are some of the things that powers some of the real-time applications that you see. Kindly don't forget to like, subscribe, drop in the comment section if you have any questions, and then also host it. Look at the how to host a static web application, host it, and then drop the link, and then let's play with it. Thank you so much for watching, and then let's meet in the next tutorial.